This is not just any story. What you are about to listen or read actually happened. A stray dog who seemed to have nothing left entered my life, and what followed was a journey of love, loss, and strength that changed everything. It was a day like any other. Gabriel had finished another long day at work, the exhaustion settling into his bones as he walked home. The usual routine was comforting, passing through the familiar streets, greeting neighbors with a nod, and most evenings stopping by a small street cart where his friends sold grilled skewers. The smoky aroma of cooking meat always invited conversation, and it had become a ritual for him and a close friend to gather there, laugh about the day, and unwind. That evening, as Gabriel approached the cart, something caught his eye. Among the small crowd gathered around for food, there was a dog, a large black dog that looked out of place. His fur was rough, with patches of dirt, but beneath it all, Gabriel could see strength. His build reminded Gabriel of a cane corso, strong and muscular, though it was clear this dog was no purebred. Despite his imposing appearance, there was something in the dog's eyes, a quiet plea, a vulnerability that tugged at Gabriel's heart. The dog barked every time someone got their food, pacing anxiously and following the scent of the grilled meat. People laughed, some shooed him away, but the dog remained persistent, his bark growing louder as his hunger grew. Gabriel smiled softly. Poor guy must be starving, he thought. He asked the vendor for an extra skewer and, with careful movements, knelt down in front of the dog, holding out a piece of meat. The dog's barking stopped instantly, his eyes locked onto the food in Gabriel's hand. Slowly, the dog approached, his tail wagging slightly in cautious anticipation. In a heartbeat, the meat was gone, and the dog licked his lips, looking up at Gabriel as if to say, "More?" Gabriel chuckled. "Hungry, aren't you?" he said, offering another piece. The dog devoured it just as quickly, and for the first time that evening, his tense demeanor softened. He wasn't just a stray, Gabriel realized. There was something more to him, a sense of intelligence and loyalty hiding behind his rough exterior. After sharing a few more pieces of meat, Gabriel stood up and looked at his friend. "I think he's lost," Gabriel said, his voice thoughtful. "He doesn't seem like just any street dog. Maybe he had a home once." The friend shrugged. "Could be, but he's on his own now. You can't save every stray you see." Gabriel hesitated for a moment, looking back at the dog, who now sat patiently at his feet, his eyes never leaving Gabriel. There was a connection forming, a quiet understanding between them. Gabriel's family had been thinking about getting another dog to keep their female dog company. Maybe this was fate. "I'm going to take him home," Gabriel decided suddenly, his heart racing with the impulse. He quickly said goodbye to his friend, rushing home to tell his mother about the dog he had found. He explained how the dog seemed different, how he wasn't just another stray, but something more. His mother, intrigued and always compassionate toward animals, agreed to come with him. Grabbing a leash, they hurried back to the street where Gabriel had left the dog. To his relief, the dog was still there, sitting under a tree, waiting. When he saw Gabriel return, his tail thumped against the ground, and Gabriel felt an unexpected warmth spread through him. With careful hands, Gabriel slipped the leash around the dog's neck. The dog didn't resist. He seemed to understand. He followed them home without a fuss, his eyes darting around as if trying to make sense of his new surroundings. They named him Jubyleu. As soon as they reached the house, Gabriel introduced Jubyleu to their female dog. To Gabriel's surprise, there was no tension between them, only curiosity. Jubyleu, despite his imposing size, was gentle. He sniffed around, exploring his new home, and by the end of the evening, it felt as though he had always been part of the family. Gabriel watched Jubyleu settle in that first night, curled up in a corner of the living room, his large frame relaxed for the first time. It was hard to believe that just hours ago, this dog had been a hungry stray, barking for scraps on the street. Now, he had found a home. As Gabriel lay in bed that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that something special had happened. There was a sense of rightness about bringing Jubyleu home, a feeling that this dog, lost and wandering, had finally found where he belonged. What Gabriel didn't know was that this connection, this bond formed in a single evening, was about to grow stronger than he could ever have imagined. Jubyleu was more than just a stray. He was about to become a source of strength, love, and inspiration for Gabriel and his family in ways they couldn't foresee. The days after Jubyleu arrived were filled with excitement and adjustment. Gabriel's house, which had always been warm and lively, now seemed even more complete. Jubyleu settled in quickly, as if he had always belonged there. From the first night, it became clear that this dog was different. He wasn't just another stray looking for food. He had found a family. Jubyleu's presence brought a new energy to the household. His large frame and powerful build made him stand out, but his gentle nature immediately won everyone over. He quickly bonded with Gabriel's other dog, a playful female who seemed thrilled to have a companion. The two would spend hours chasing each other around the yard, their paws thumping against the earth as they played. Despite his size, Jubyleu was surprisingly gentle during these games, always mindful of the smaller dog. Gabriel watched them with a smile, feeling a sense of pride in how easily Jubyleu had adapted. It was as if he had been waiting for a place to belong all along, and now that he had found it, he wasn't going to let it go. Jubyleu's routine became a regular part of the family's life. Every morning, he would trot alongside Gabriel during his pre-work walk. His powerful strides and calm demeanor made Gabriel feel protected, as if nothing could go wrong with Jubyleu by his side. Neighbors often commented on how impressive he looked, with some asking if he was a cane corso or a mix. Gabriel didn't know, and frankly, it didn't matter. To him, Jubyleu was perfect as he was. At home, Jubyleu became a shadow, following Gabriel everywhere. Whether Gabriel was cooking in the kitchen, working at his desk, or relaxing in the living room, Jubyleu was always there, his loyal companion, never more than a few feet away. His dark eyes seemed to hold a depth of understanding, as if he knew he had been given a second chance, and he wasn't about to waste it. But it wasn't just Gabriel who adored Jubyleu. His mother had also grown fond of the dog. She marveled at how he seemed to know when someone needed comfort, often resting his large head in her lap when she was deep in thought. His quiet strength and unwavering loyalty brought a sense of calm to the household, and it wasn't long before the entire family couldn't imagine life without him. One afternoon, as Gabriel and his mother sat in the backyard, watching Jubyleu and the other dog chase each other, his mother turned to him with a soft smile. "He's changed the whole house," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "It's like he was meant to be here with us." Gabriel nodded. "I can't believe he was just wandering around, lost. It feels like he's always been part of the family." As the weeks passed, Jubyleu continued to thrive. His coat, once dull and matted, now gleamed with health. His eyes, once wary and cautious, sparkled with happiness. It was clear to everyone that Jubyleu had found his home, not just in the physical sense, but in the hearts of those around him. The bond between Gabriel and Jubyleu grew stronger with each passing day. There were moments when Gabriel would catch Jubyleu staring at him, as if the dog was silently thanking him for the life he now had. In return, Gabriel felt a deep sense of gratitude for Jubyleu's presence. The dog had become more than just a pet. He was a friend, a protector, and a source of endless comfort. But there was something more about Jubyleu, something Gabriel couldn't quite put into words. It was as though the dog had an unspoken wisdom, a quiet strength that went beyond the usual loyalty of a pet. Whenever Gabriel was stressed or overwhelmed, Jubyleu would appear at his side, his calm presence enough to ease any worries. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Gabriel sat on the porch, looking out at the setting sun. Jubyleu was by his side, his head resting on Gabriel's knee. As Gabriel absent-mindedly stroked the dog's fur, he couldn't help but think about how different life had been before Jubyleu came along. It was a small gesture, taking in a stray dog, but it had brought so much more than he ever expected. "I wonder what you went through before you found us," Gabriel murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Jubyleu didn't respond, of course, but his steady gaze met Gabriel's, and in that moment, it felt like they understood each other perfectly. Whatever hardships Jubyleu had faced before, they were in the past now. He was safe, loved, and most importantly, home. As Gabriel stood to head inside, Jubyleu followed, his large paws patting softly against the floor. The evening light cast long shadows across the house, and as Gabriel turned to close the door, he glanced back at his loyal companion. Jubyleu was already curled up in his usual spot by the couch, his eyes half closed in contentment. Life with Jubyleu had become routine, but it was a routine that Gabriel cherished. Every day, the bond between them grew stronger, and every day, Jubyleu reminded Gabriel of the simple joys in life: loyalty, love, and the comfort of having someone by your side. For Gabriel, adopting Jubyleu had been one of the best decisions he had ever made. What had started as a spontaneous act of kindness had turned into something much deeper, a lifelong friendship built on trust and love. But as perfect as things seemed, life has a way of throwing the unexpected. And soon, Gabriel would be forced to face a challenge he never saw coming, one that would test not only his love for Jubyleu, but his own strength as well. For years, life with Jubyleu had been full of joy and companionship. He had seamlessly become a part of Gabriel's daily routine, and the bond between them had only grown stronger. Jubyleu's gentle demeanor and loyalty had made him not just a pet, but a true member of the family. Every day, he brought happiness to Gabriel and his mother, always ready with a wagging tail and calm presence. But then, without warning, something changed. One afternoon, as Gabriel was coming home from work, he noticed Jubyleu walking a bit slower than usual. At first, it seemed like nothing more than the wariness of a dog who had been playing in the yard all day. But when Jubyleu came closer, Gabriel saw it, the slight limp in his right front leg. It was subtle, barely noticeable at first, but Gabriel's eyes were trained on it. "Did you hurt yourself, boy?" Gabriel asked, crouching down to inspect Jubyleu's paw. He gently ran his hand over the dog's leg, checking for any signs of injury, but nothing seemed out of place. Jubyleu looked up at him with his usual calm gaze, as if to reassure him that everything was fine. Gabriel brushed it off, thinking perhaps Jubyleu had just twisted his leg while running. After all, he was a large dog, and it wasn't uncommon for big dogs to have minor aches after a long day of activity. But over the next few days, the limp didn't go away. In fact, it seemed to get worse. Gabriel's concern began to grow as he watched Jubyleu struggle to put weight on his right leg. By the end of the week, Jubyleu was no longer walking normally. He was holding his leg up, avoiding putting any pressure on it at all. "Maybe it's just a sprain," Gabriel's mother suggested one morning as they watched Jubyleu hobble across the yard. "Big dogs can hurt themselves just like we do. He probably just needs some rest." Gabriel wanted to believe that. He wanted to think that this was just a small injury, something that would heal on its own with time. But deep down, there was a nagging feeling in his gut. Something wasn't right. It was unlike Jubyleu to show any signs of pain. Even when he had first been rescued, malnourished and weary, he had shown remarkable resilience. For him to be limping this badly meant that something was wrong, something beyond a simple sprain. Finally, Gabriel decided that it was time to take him to the vet. The day of the appointment, Gabriel felt a pit of anxiety in his stomach. He had a sinking feeling that this wasn't going to be a simple diagnosis. He glanced down at Jubyleu, who was lying peacefully by his feet in the waiting room of the veterinary clinic, unaware of the growing concern surrounding him. Jubyleu's calmness was comforting, but Gabriel couldn't shake the worry building inside him. When the vet called them in, Gabriel gently guided Jubyleu to the examination table. The vet, an older man with a gruff demeanor, began his examination, feeling along Jubyleu's leg and carefully manipulating the joints. Gabriel watched closely, searching the vet's face for any sign of what might be wrong. After a few minutes of silent examination, the vet straightened up, his expression serious. "I don't want to jump to conclusions," he began, "but this could be something more serious than just a sprain. I'm seeing signs of bone deterioration." Gabriel's heart sank. "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice tight with worry. The vet hesitated for a moment before answering. "It could be a condition called osteosarcoma, a type of bone cancer. It's fairly common in large breeds like him, and it can progress quickly if left untreated." Gabriel felt as though the air had been knocked out of him. Cancer? Jubyleu? The words didn't make sense in his mind. This was the dog who had bounded through life with so much energy and joy. How could he possibly have something as terrible as cancer? "I'd recommend further tests to confirm the diagnosis," the vet continued, his voice clinical and detached. "But if it is osteosarcoma, we'll likely need to amputate the leg to stop the cancer from spreading." Amputation. The word echoed in Gabriel's mind, a terrifying prospect that felt too extreme to even consider. He stared at Jubyleu, who was now sitting calmly by his side, unaware of the grim conversation happening around him. Gabriel's mind raced. Could this really be happening? Could the dog who had brought so much joy into his life now be facing something so devastating? He wanted to ask the vet more questions, but he couldn't find the words. Everything felt surreal, like a bad dream he couldn't wake up from. "Let me know how you want to proceed," the vet said, handing Gabriel a card with the information for a follow-up appointment. Gabriel left the clinic in a daze, his heart heavy with worry. His mother, who had been waiting outside, saw the look on his face and immediately knew something was wrong. As they drove home, Gabriel explained what the vet had said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I can't believe it," his mother whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "Jubyleu has always been so strong. How could this happen?" Gabriel didn't have an answer. All he knew was that his beloved Jubyleu, the dog who had become his constant companion, was now facing an uncertain and terrifying future. That night, as Gabriel sat on the couch with Jubyleu resting beside him, the weight of the situation finally began to sink in. The bond they had formed over the years made the possibility of losing Jubyleu feel unbearable. But as he looked down at Jubyleu's peaceful face, Gabriel knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to give up. He would fight for Jubyleu, no matter what it took. The days following the vet's grim prognosis were some of the hardest Gabriel had ever faced. The word cancer echoed in his mind constantly, a dark cloud that overshadowed every thought. He found himself unable to focus on anything else. His work, his usual conversations with friends, even the small joys that Jubyleu had brought into his life. All of it felt distant, swallowed by the overwhelming fear of losing his loyal companion. Gabriel's mother was equally shaken. Jubyleu had become part of the family, and the possibility of his illness struck hard. They spent hours discussing their options, but each conversation seemed to loop back to the same terrifying reality. If it was osteosarcoma, the only way to save Jubyleu was to amputate his leg. It was an unthinkable decision. Gabriel sat at the kitchen table late one evening, staring blankly at the vet's card in front of him. His mother sat across from him, her hands clenched tightly around a cup of tea. The house was silent, except for the occasional sound of Jubyleu shifting in his sleep, curled up on his bed in the corner of the room. "We have to do something, Gabriel," his mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't just wait around hoping this will go away." "I know," Gabriel replied, his voice heavy, "but I can't wrap my head around it. Amputating his leg? I mean, how is that fair to him?" His mother sighed, her eyes soft with sympathy. "It's not fair. None of this is fair. But if that's what will save him, we have to consider it. He's still so full of life. I can't imagine just letting him go without a fight." Gabriel nodded, though his heart ached at the thought of what Jubyleu would have to endure. The idea of his strong, vibrant dog losing a part of himself was almost too painful to bear. But as Gabriel looked across the room at Jubyleu, who was now peacefully sleeping despite the weight on his leg, he knew he couldn't let fear control his decisions. "We'll get a second opinion," Gabriel finally said. "I want to be sure. I can't just rush into this." The next day, Gabriel and his mother took Jubyleu to another veterinarian, hoping for a different answer. They explained the situation, the diagnosis, and the possibility of osteosarcoma. The second vet, a kind woman with a much more compassionate demeanor than the first, listened patiently and examined Jubyleu with care. After running additional tests, she confirmed what they had been dreading. It was indeed osteosarcoma. There was no escaping it. The cancer was aggressive, and if they didn't act quickly, it would spread to other parts of his body. "I know this is a lot to take in," the vet said gently, sensing the weight of their silence. "But the amputation is the best option to give Jubyleu more time. Dogs are incredibly resilient. Many of them adjust very well to life on three legs, especially when they have the kind of support and love you're clearly giving him." Gabriel's heart sank, but the vet's words gave him a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. If Jubyleu could survive the surgery, if he could adapt, then perhaps they could still have more time together. But the decision still felt crushing. That evening, Gabriel and his mother sat together once more, the weight of the day hanging heavy in the air. They knew what they had to do, but knowing didn't make it any easier. Jubyleu, unaware of the difficult choice being made on his behalf, lay at Gabriel's feet, his head resting on Gabriel's shoes as if sensing his unease. "We're going to do this," Gabriel said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll go through with the surgery." His mother placed a hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. "He's going to be okay. He's a fighter, Gabriel, just like you." The morning of the surgery came faster than either of them was ready for. Gabriel and his mother drove Jubyleu to the veterinary hospital, their hearts heavy with anxiety. Jubyleu, ever calm and trusting, sat in the back seat, his large, warm eyes looking out the window as if it were just another day. When they arrived at the hospital, the weight of the situation hit Gabriel harder than he expected. The sterile smell of the clinic, the quiet murmur of other pet owners in the waiting room, and the knowledge of what was about to happen all felt overwhelming. As they handed Jubyleu over to the vet, Gabriel knelt down beside him, his hands shaking as he stroked the dog's head. "You're gonna be okay, buddy?" Gabriel whispered, his voice trembling. "I promise." Jubyleu looked at him with those deep, trusting eyes, and Gabriel felt a lump form in his throat. He wanted to believe his own words, to trust that this was the right decision, but doubt and fear lingered at the edges of his mind. The surgery lasted all day. Gabriel and his mother waited in the clinic's small cafeteria, the hours stretching on as they tried to distract themselves with small talk and coffee. But every minute felt like an eternity. The uncertainty gnawed at them, the fear that something might go wrong, that they might lose Jubyleu on the operating table. Finally, in the late afternoon, the vet came to speak with them. Her expression was calm, but there was a seriousness in her eyes. "The surgery went well," she said. "Jubyleu's in recovery now. He's a bit groggy from the anesthesia, but everything went smoothly." Gabriel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Relief washed over him, though it was tinged with the sobering reality of what lay ahead. The vet continued to explain the post-surgical care they would need to provide, the physical therapy that might help Jubyleu adapt to life on three legs, and the precautions they would need to take to prevent further complications. But there was a new challenge. The clinic didn't have enough post-surgical resources to keep Jubyleu overnight. Gabriel's mother could see the panic rise in his eyes. How were they supposed to care for a dog who had just undergone such an intense surgery without proper medication and support? That night, Gabriel and his mother scrambled to find an emergency clinic that could provide the pain relief and monitoring that Jubyleu so desperately needed. It was a frantic race, calling every clinic they could find, driving from one place to another, desperate to ensure that Jubyleu wouldn't suffer in pain. Hours passed before they finally found a clinic willing to take him in for the night. As they handed Jubyleu over, exhausted but relieved, Gabriel leaned down and kissed the top of his dog's head. "You're going to be okay, Jubyleu," he whispered once again. "We've got you." That night was the longest of Gabriel's life, but at least now he had hope. The sun was already beginning to rise when Gabriel and his mother arrived back home after leaving Jubyleu at the emergency clinic. They were exhausted, physically and emotionally drained from the ordeal of the past few days. Gabriel's mind was still reeling from the surgery, from the sight of Jubyleu, who had once been so strong and full of life, now fragile and in pain. But amidst the exhaustion, there was relief. Jubyleu had made it through the surgery. He had survived. Gabriel tried to sleep, but the images of the day kept playing in his mind. The sterile clinic, the sound of the vet's voice as she explained the procedure, the frantic search for a clinic that could take Jubyleu in after the operation. Even though the worst seemed to be over, Gabriel's heart remained heavy with worry. Jubyleu had lost a leg, but he hadn't lost his spirit. Gabriel clung to that thought as the minutes ticked by, waiting for news from the clinic. He had to believe that his dog, the one who had shown so much strength in the past, would overcome this too. The following day, Gabriel and his mother returned to the clinic to bring Jubyleu home. As they entered the recovery area, Gabriel's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what to expect. Would Jubyleu recognize him? How would he react to having lost a leg? his thoughts swirled with anxiety. When they reached Jubyleu's recovery room, the vet greeted them with a tired but reassuring smile. "He's doing well," she said. "Still a bit groggy from the pain medication, but he's strong. I think he's going to pull through just fine." Gabriel's eyes landed on Jubyleu, who lay on a padded bed in the corner of the room. His massive body looked smaller than usual, curled up in a protective ball. The missing leg was hard to ignore, a stark reminder of the battle they were fighting. But then, as if sensing Gabriel's presence, Jubyleu lifted his head. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted. Jubyleu's tail gave a slow, gentle wag. Gabriel's heart swelled. Despite everything, despite the pain and confusion, Jubyleu was still there. He was still the dog Gabriel had always known, the loyal companion who had never wavered. And now, he was showing Gabriel that he hadn't lost the will to fight. Gabriel knelt beside Jubyleu, running his hands gently over his head. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're going to be okay. I'm so proud of you." Jubyleu's eyes softened, and though he was clearly tired, there was a calmness in his gaze, a quiet acceptance of his new reality. Gabriel could feel the tension in his chest begin to ease, if only a little. Jubyleu was still himself, and that was what mattered. With the vet's help, Gabriel and his mother carefully loaded Jubyleu into the car. The journey home was quiet, the soft hum of the engine filling the space between them. Gabriel kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching Jubyleu as he lay quietly in the back seat, his breathing slow and steady. When they finally arrived home, Gabriel's mother opened the door, and Jubyleu lifted his head, looking around as if to say, "I'm ready." They brought him inside, setting up a comfortable spot for him to rest in the living room. Gabriel helped Jubyleu out of the car, gently supporting his weight as he found his balance on 3 legs. It was slow at first, each step tentative, but Jubyleu was determined. With every movement, he seemed to adjust a little more, figuring out how to navigate this new world with one less limb. Gabriel watched in awe as Jubyleu made his way to his usual spot by the couch, curling up with a soft sigh. Despite everything, he had found his place again. Gabriel couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Jubyleu was tougher than anyone could have imagined. Over the next few days, Gabriel and his mother worked tirelessly to help Jubyleu through his recovery. There were sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and occasional setbacks, but through it all, Jubyleu remained resilient. He adapted to life on 3 legs faster than anyone expected, showing an incredible amount of strength and determination. By the end of the week, something miraculous happened. Gabriel was sitting in the backyard, enjoying the afternoon sun, when he saw it. Jubyleu, who had been resting in the shade, slowly stood up. Gabriel watched as the dog took a few tentative steps, his movements steady but cautious, and then with a burst of energy, Jubyleu began to run. It wasn't the same as before, of course. There was a slight unevenness to his gait, the missing leg affecting his balance. But to Gabriel, it was nothing short of miraculous. Jubyleu was running again, his tail wagging with joy as he circled the yard. Gabriel stood up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You're incredible, Jubyleu," he whispered, watching as his dog bounded across the grass. "You really are." Jubyleu ran up to him, panting happily, and Gabriel knelt down to hug him. He felt the warmth of Jubyleu's fur against his skin, the familiar comfort of having his dog close. And in that moment, Gabriel knew that they had made the right choice. The surgery had been painful, the recovery long and difficult, but Jubyleu had proven that he wasn't going to let anything hold him back. It wasn't just a physical victory, it was a testament to the bond they shared, to the love and trust that had carried them through the darkest moments. From that day forward, life began to return to a new kind of normal. Jubyleu, despite having only 3 legs, resumed his role as Gabriel's loyal companion. They took walks together, played in the yard, and spent quiet evenings side by side. The missing leg was hardly noticeable anymore. What mattered most was that Jubyleu was still there, still fighting, still living life to the fullest. As Gabriel watched Jubyleu trot happily around the yard, he couldn't help but smile. The future was still uncertain, but for now, they had this moment. And that was enough. The next 2 years with Jubyleu were a gift. Despite the challenges he had faced, Jubyleu never let anything slow him down. He adapted beautifully to life on 3 legs, and Gabriel often marveled at how seamlessly he returned to his routine. The same dog, who had once hobbled in pain, was now back to chasing Gabriel's other dog around the yard, trotting alongside Gabriel on their morning walks, and resting by his feet at the end of the day. The surgeries, the sleepless nights, and the constant worry seemed like a distant memory. It was almost as if the cancer had never been there at all. Jubyleu was happy, and in those quiet moments of joy, Gabriel allowed himself to believe that the worst was behind them. But cancer is a silent enemy. It doesn't give up easily, and 2 years after the surgery, the shadows returned. It started as a small change, one that Gabriel might not have noticed if he hadn't been so in tune with Jubyleu. At first, it was just a subtle stiffness in his movement, the way his energy seemed to dip a little earlier in the day. Gabriel brushed it off, thinking that perhaps Jubyleu was just tired or feeling the effects of age. After all, he had been through so much. But deep down, Gabriel's gut told him something was wrong. One evening, as he sat on the porch watching the sun set with Jubyleu resting by his side, Gabriel reached down to stroke his dog's fur. As his hand moved over Jubyleu's body, he felt it. A lump. It was small, barely noticeable, but it sent a chill down Gabriel's spine. "No," Gabriel whispered, his heart sinking. He gently prodded the lump again, hoping it was just a muscle knot or something harmless. But the sinking feeling in his chest grew heavier. The next morning, Gabriel took Jubyleu to the vet. He had hoped that maybe he was overreacting, that the lump was just a benign growth, something unrelated to the cancer that had plagued them years earlier. But the look on the vet's face as she examined Jubyleu said it all. "I'm so sorry, Gabriel," she said softly. "It looks like the cancer has returned." Gabriel's world crumbled around him. He had known this was a possibility. Osteosarcoma was aggressive, and even with the surgery and treatments, there had always been a chance that the cancer would come back. But he had hoped, no, he had believed, that they had beaten it. "What can we do?" Gabriel asked, his voice barely audible. "Is there anything else we can try?" The vet hesitated, her eyes filled with sympathy. "We could try another round of treatment. But Gabriel, the cancer is spreading quickly. Jubyleu has fought so hard, but I don't know if we can stop it this time." Gabriel swallowed the lump in his throat, his heart aching. He looked down at Jubyleu, who was sitting calmly by his side, unaware of the grim conversation happening around him. The thought of losing him, of saying goodbye, was unbearable. "Is he in pain?" Gabriel asked, his voice trembling. "Not yet," the vet replied gently. "But as the cancer progresses, he will start to feel discomfort. We can manage the pain, but at some point, you'll need to think about what's best for him." Gabriel nodded, though his mind felt numb. He couldn't imagine a life without Jubyleu by his side. For years, this dog had been his companion, his source of comfort and strength. How could he let go of that? How could he make the decision to end the life of the creature that had brought him so much joy? The drive home was quiet. Jubyleu, ever calm and trusting, lay in the back seat, his eyes closed as if enjoying the gentle hum of the car's engine. Gabriel's thoughts raced. The weight of the decision ahead of him pressed heavily on his chest. That night, Gabriel sat beside Jubyleu on the floor, his hand resting on the dog's head. Tears filled his eyes as he whispered, "I don't know what to do, buddy. I don't want you to suffer, but I can't imagine letting you go." Jubyleu didn't respond, of course, but he nudged Gabriel's hand with his nose, his tail thumping softly against the floor. It was as if he was telling Gabriel that it would be okay, that he trusted him to make the right decision, no matter how hard it was. For the next few weeks, Gabriel did everything he could to make Jubyleu comfortable. He showered him with love, fed him his favorite treats, and took him on slow, leisurely walks through the park. But as the days passed, it became clear that Jubyleu was growing weaker. His energy faded, and the sparkle in his eyes dimmed. The cancer was winning. One evening, as Gabriel and his mother sat with Jubyleu in the backyard, watching the sunset, Gabriel knew it was time. Jubyleu was struggling to stand, his breaths coming in shallow gasps. He looked at Gabriel with tired eyes, and in that moment, Gabriel understood what his dog was trying to tell him. "I know, buddy," Gabriel whispered, his voice breaking. "I know." The next morning, Gabriel made the hardest phone call of his life. The vet, kind and understanding, arranged for Jubyleu to be put to sleep peacefully at home, surrounded by the people who loved him the most. When the day came, Gabriel spent the entire morning with Jubyleu, sitting quietly beside him, stroking his fur and whispering words of love and gratitude. His mother and aunt were there too, their eyes filled with tears as they said their goodbyes to the dog who had become such an important part of their family. Jubyleu, ever calm and trusting, lay with his head in Gabriel's lap, his eyes closed in peaceful contentment. He seemed to know what was happening, and there was no fear in his gaze, only love. When the vet arrived, Gabriel felt his heart breaking. But he knew this was the right thing to do. Jubyleu had fought so hard, had been so brave, and now it was time to let him rest. The vet knelt beside Gabriel and gently explained the process. Gabriel nodded, though the words felt distant. All he could focus on was Jubyleu, the dog who had given him so much, the dog he was about to say goodbye to. As the vet administered the injection, Gabriel held Jubyleu close, whispering softly in his ear, "I love you, Jubyleu. You were the best dog anyone could ever ask for. Thank you for everything." Jubyleu's breathing slowed, and then, with one final sigh, it stopped. Gabriel sat there for a long time, cradling Jubyleu's body, his tears falling freely. The pain was overwhelming, a deep, aching loss that seemed too great to bear. But as he looked down at Jubyleu, he knew that his dog had lived a good life, a life full of love, joy, and the unbreakable bond they had shared. In the days that followed, Gabriel struggled to adjust to life without Jubyleu. The house felt emptier, quieter, and the absence of his loyal companion was a constant ache. But even in his grief, Gabriel found comfort in the memories they had made together. Jubyleu had left behind a legacy of love and resilience, one that Gabriel would carry with him forever. As he stood in the backyard one evening, watching the sun set in the same spot where he and Jubyleu had spent so many quiet moments together, Gabriel smiled through his tears. "Thank you, Jubyleu," he whispered, "for everything." And in that moment, he knew that Jubyleu would always be with him, not just in memory, but in the love and strength he had brought into Gabriel's life. The days after Jubyleu's passing were some of the hardest Gabriel had ever faced. The house felt quieter, emptier, as if the energy that Jubyleu had brought to every corner of their lives had suddenly vanished. There were no more soft footsteps following Gabriel from room to room, no more wagging tail greeting him when he came home, and no more quiet companionship on long walks or lazy afternoons. The absence was palpable, a constant reminder of the loss. Gabriel found himself reaching for Jubyleu's leash one morning, out of habit. He stared at it for a moment, the weight of the emptiness sinking in. His faithful companion wasn't there anymore, and the finality of that truth hit harder than he expected. The house may have been filled with love and memories, but without Jubyleu's presence, something felt undeniably missing. Despite the overwhelming grief, Gabriel knew that Jubyleu's time with him had been a gift. Over the years, Jubyleu had taught him so much about loyalty, strength, and the power of love. The pain Gabriel felt now was a reflection of just how much Jubyleu had meant to him and how deeply their bond had grown. One evening, as Gabriel sat in the backyard, watching the sunset like he had done so many times with Jubyleu, he allowed himself to reflect on the journey they had shared. The laughter, the challenges, the love that had grown stronger with each passing day. Jubyleu had come into Gabriel's life unexpectedly, just a stray dog on the streets, and yet he had left an impact that would last forever. In those moments of reflection, Gabriel realized something important. Jubyleu's legacy wasn't defined by his illness or the pain they had endured together. It was defined by the joy, the resilience, and the unwavering companionship that Jubyleu had offered every single day. Gabriel had always thought that he was the one saving Jubyleu when he brought him home all those years ago. But now, looking back, he understood that Jubyleu had saved him in more ways than he could count. In the dog's quiet, steady presence, Gabriel had found comfort, strength, and a reminder of the simple, beautiful things in life: love, trust, and the bond that can form between two souls, even if one of them walks on four legs. As he sat there, the memories of their time together flooded his mind. He remembered the early days, when Jubyleu had first come home, how easily he had adapted to their family. He thought about the surgery, the long nights spent worrying, and the triumph of seeing Jubyleu running on 3 legs, full of life and determination. Even though Jubyleu was gone, those memories would remain. And Gabriel realized that was how Jubyleu would live on, not just in photographs or the empty spot by the couch, but in the heart of everyone who had loved him. A few weeks after Jubyleu's passing, Gabriel decided to honor his memory in a special way. He planted a small tree in the backyard, right in the spot where Jubyleu had loved to rest, watching the world go by. It was a simple gesture, but it felt right. The tree would grow, just as Jubyleu's love had grown in their lives, and every time Gabriel looked at it, he would be reminded of the dog who had taught him so much. As the tree took root and began to grow, Gabriel found himself healing too. The pain of losing Jubyleu didn't disappear, but it became more manageable, softened by the knowledge that he had given Jubyleu a life full of love, and in return, Jubyleu had given him so much more. Jubyleu had shown Gabriel the importance of living fully, of cherishing the moments they had together, and of facing life's challenges with courage. Gabriel's mother, too, found comfort in the memories they shared. They often sat together in the backyard, reminiscing about Jubyleu's antics, his gentle presence, and the way he had brought their family closer. The grief was still there, but it was woven with gratitude. Gratitude for having had the chance to love Jubyleu and be loved in return. As the months passed, Gabriel felt a growing sense of peace. He had lost a companion, but he hadn't lost the lessons that Jubyleu had taught him. And in a way, Jubyleu's legacy would continue in everything Gabriel did, every time he extended kindness, patience, and love, values that his dog had embodied so effortlessly. One evening, Gabriel sat by the growing tree, his mind quiet, the sadness no longer as sharp as it once was. The sky was a brilliant shade of orange and pink, much like the sunsets he had watched with Jubyleu. He smiled softly to himself, feeling Jubyleu's presence in the stillness of the air, in the peace of the evening. "Thank you," Gabriel whispered, his voice filled with love and gratitude. Jubyleu might not have been physically there anymore, but in that moment, Gabriel felt his spirit as clearly as if he were sitting by his side. Jubyleu had given Gabriel the gift of love, the strength to face even the hardest moments, and the reminder that even in loss, love never truly dies. The tree swayed gently in the breeze, its branches reaching toward the sky, and Gabriel knew that as long as he carried Jubyleu's memory with him, his loyal companion would never be far away.